I never thought I would write this, but I guess Reddit is the only place I can be honest without judgment. My name is David. I'm 58, married for 26 years, and I have two beautiful daughters, Claire, who's 28, and Emma, who just turned 24. We built what most people would call a perfect life. We own a modest house in the suburbs. We take family vacations. We have the occasional argument. But we always made up. I never imagined that everything could unravel while I was facing the fight of my life. It started about a year ago. At first, it was subtle, fatigue, nights when I couldn't sleep, and a nagging pain in my side that wouldn't go away. I brushed it off as stress, maybe a side effect of getting older. But then Claire noticed that I was losing weight without trying, and Emma kept asking if I was okay when I looked pale. I tried to laugh it off, saying it was nothing, that I was fine. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Finally, after months of hesitation, I went to see my doctor. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and fear, and as I sat in that waiting room, I realized how fragile life really is. The doctor's face, calm but serious, didn't make me feel any better. "David," he said, "the scans show you have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I'm so sorry." I remember that moment like it happened yesterday. My hands went numb, my throat dry. I wanted to scream, to call my daughters, to hug my wife, Karen, but the words caught in my chest. I walked out of the office as if in a fog. The world muted around me. I had cancer. Terminal cancer. The word echoed in my mind. Terminal. The first few weeks were a blur of appointments, scans, blood tests, and sleepless nights. Chemotherapy was brutal. Nausea, fatigue, hair falling out. But what hurt the most wasn't the physical pain. It was the way life started to feel fleeting, like sand slipping through my fingers. I tried to keep a brave face for my daughters, but I could see the worry in Karen's eyes. Or so I thought. It was around this time that I began noticing little things. Small inconsistencies, the kind you only see if you're paying attention. Karen started staying later at the gym than she said. Her phone would buzz constantly, and she quickly pulled away whenever I walked into the room. At first, I told myself it was paranoia, the kind that comes with illness. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe she was just trying to cope with my diagnosis. But then came the text, small flashes of her hiding messages, quickly turning the screen when I approached. I remember the night I found the first real proof. I was going to the laundry, as I sometimes did to help out since I couldn't do much else. And there it was, a folded receipt from a hotel, dated 2 weeks earlier, not far from the city. I froze. I stared at it as if it were a ticking bomb. My heart raced, every beat a thunderclap. How could she do this while I was fighting for my life? My hands shook, and for a moment I wanted to scream, to throw the paper across the room, to confront her and demand answers. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. I spent the next few days in a haze, pretending nothing was wrong while the suspicion gnawed at me. I started paying attention to the little details. Perfume lingering in rooms she claimed she was alone in, missed calls from unknown numbers, her laughter during phone calls that sounded too intimate. I tried to reason with myself, to find excuses. Maybe it was a colleague. Maybe it was harmless. But every fiber of my being screamed the truth. It got worse when she started acting differently around me. Karen became overly affectionate at times, almost apologetic, but cold and distant at others. She would fuss over my meals, ask if I was taking my meds, yet there was a distance I couldn't bridge. I felt like a spectator in my own life, watching someone I loved slip away into a world I wasn't invited to. The betrayal cut deeper than the cancer ever could. One night, after a particularly grueling chemotherapy session, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her sleeping face. The moonlight cast a soft glow across her features, and for a brief moment, I remembered the woman I married, the laughter, the shared dreams, the late-night talks after the girls went to bed. And then I remembered the hotel receipt, the hidden texts, the lies. A wave of nausea hit me. Not from the chemo this time, but from the realization that the person I trusted most had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I wanted to confront her, to yell, to demand answers. But I didn't, because as much as the betrayal hurt, I was more consumed by a quiet, profound grief, not just for her actions, but for the unfairness of life. Here I was, battling a disease that would eventually take me, and my marriage, the one thing I thought was unshakable, was crumbling at the same time. I felt powerless, and that was terrifying. In the following weeks, I started noticing patterns. The texts, the late nights, the sudden business trips that she never mentioned before. Every small clue was a dagger to my heart. And yet, I held it all in. I couldn't let Claire or Emma see me like this. Not when they already had to see their father fighting for his life. I smiled. I laughed at dinner. I joked about chemotherapy side effects. I became a master of hiding pain. But the pain was there, constant and gnawing. It followed me everywhere, into the bathroom, the kitchen, the living room. It was a silent scream, a reminder that life isn't fair, that people you love can hurt you in ways you never imagined. And yet, amidst all this, I found a strange clarity. The cancer had taken away my illusions about my own mortality, and the betrayal stripped away my illusions about human nature. I was left with only the raw, unvarnished truth. Life is short, people are flawed, and the only thing I could control was my response. I started keeping a journal that no one knew about. Every thought, every suspicion, every wave of despair went onto those pages. It was my sanctuary, my way of keeping my mind from unraveling completely. And in those pages, I began to see a pattern forming, not just of Karen's betrayal, but of my own resilience. I realized that even if life had dealt me a terrible hand, I still had the power to choose how I faced it. And so I waited, not for revenge, not for confrontation, but for understanding. I needed to see how far this went, why it happened, and what it meant for the life I still had left. The next steps were unclear, and fear lurked behind every shadow. But I clung to one thing, the knowledge that I would endure. Because that's all any of us can do in the face of pain, loss, and betrayal. Endure and try to keep our dignity intact. The days turned into weeks, and my suspicion became a gnawing certainty. I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. Karen's world was shifting beneath me, and every subtle clue I had previously brushed off now seemed like a glaring neon sign. She was living a double life. I'd catch her in fleeting moments, her fingers trembling as she typed on her phone, her eyes darting toward the screen whenever I entered the room. The laughter on the other end, once something I might have laughed about, now filled me with an almost physical ache. One evening, after another grueling chemotherapy session, I returned home exhausted. I barely had the strength to cook dinner for the girls, let alone engage in any meaningful conversation. Karen was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a casual grace that made my chest tighten. I watched her silently, a strange mix of longing, anger, and disbelief churning inside me. It was then that she glanced at me, smiling in a way that had once made me melt, but now made me nauseous. "David, are you okay?" she asked, her voice lilting, soft, the inflection almost too practiced. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice hollow. The truth was, I wasn't fine. I was falling apart in ways she could never imagine. But I couldn't let the girls see me like this. Not now. Not ever. I swallowed the words that wanted to escape and focused on dinner, slicing the vegetables mechanically, my mind racing. Later that night, I found myself alone in the study, going through what little evidence I had been collecting. Receipts, unexplained charges, snippets of conversations I overheard by accident. Every piece painted a picture I couldn't unsee. And then there was a message brief from someone I didn't know. It was addressed to her, a simple, "Can't wait to see you again," and my stomach dropped into a pit I didn't know existed. I read it over and over, disbelief and anger mixing into a suffocating fog. I confronted myself in the mirror that night. Who was I? A man facing the worst fight of his life, battling a disease that would eventually take me. And here I was, being stabbed in the heart by the person I trusted most. I wanted to scream, to destroy, to confront her, but I didn't. Not yet. I was learning painfully that in the face of betrayal, patience was a weapon. Observation, restraint, and quiet calculation. The cancer had taught me that life could end at any moment. The betrayal had taught me that anger and confrontation could destroy more than they heal. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing patterns in her behavior that confirmed what I had feared. late nights out with friends, phone calls taken in secret, hurried texts when she thought I wasn't looking. Every small deception was a shard of glass in my chest. I began keeping track, meticulously, silently, as if creating a record not for her, not for anyone, but for myself, to remind me that the truth existed even when it felt unbearable. Then came the night I couldn't avoid it any longer. I was lying in bed, the girls away at college and work, and she returned later than usual. I pretended to be asleep, hoping to gather more evidence. When I opened my eyes, she was on the phone, whispering. Her voice was low, urgent, affectionate in a way that made my blood run cold. I didn't have to hear the words clearly. The tone said it all. My hands shook so violently I thought I might drop the phone I had been using to record the conversation. I didn't. I couldn't. I just listened, the betrayal etching itself into every nerve. The next morning, I faced her. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "Karen, I need to know, is this true?" She froze. The knife twisted, subtly, as if she knew I had finally seen through her carefully constructed facade. The denial came first, almost mechanical. "What are you talking about?" she asked. I kept my gaze steady. "Don't lie to me. I know." Her eyes shifted. Guilt, shame, fear, emotions I had never seen her show, flashed across her face. And then the confession. Short, clipped, almost rehearsed. She had been seeing someone else for months. The details she provided almost irrelevant to me. The truth was the truth. I felt my body go cold, the room spinning. But strangely, there was also clarity. The confirmation didn't destroy me as I had feared. It illuminated the situation, finally allowing me to see it for what it was. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The betrayal, as excruciating as it was not the entirety of my life. I was still here. I was still fighting. And I had a choice in how I would respond. In the following days, I withdrew into myself, keeping my pain private. The girls noticed my somberness, but I brushed it off, attributing it to chemotherapy. Karen tried to engage, apologizing, trying to reconcile, but I stayed distant. Not out of vengeance, not out of spite, but out of necessity. My life had become a delicate balancing act, managing treatment, protecting my daughters, and processing the staggering betrayal that had invaded every corner of my existence. I began thinking about the time we had spent together, the shared memories, the laughter, the dreams we had built. And even as the betrayal stung, I recognized that anger and hatred would only consume the remaining days I had left. I wanted something different. I wanted peace, dignity, and the ability to face the end on my own terms. And so I made a silent decision. I would forgive her, not because what she did was acceptable, far from it, but because forgiveness was the only way I could preserve what little control remained in my life. I would continue to live, to endure, to cherish the moments with my daughters. I would not allow her actions to define my remaining days. In the quiet of my study, surrounded by medical reports, receipts, and the fragmented pieces of my marriage, I began to write, not a letter to her, not a note for the girls, just words on paper, a meditation on betrayal, illness, and resilience. The act itself became a form of therapy, a way to reclaim agency over my own emotions. And through it all, I realized something. Life is painfully unfair, often cruel, and yet profoundly beautiful. Even in the darkest hours, even as the body weakens and the heart breaks, there exists a possibility for grace, a chance to rise above betrayal, to find meaning in suffering, and leave behind a legacy of strength and compassion. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with pain, treatment, and the ever-present shadow of mortality. But I felt, for the first time in months, a strange sense of calm. The betrayal had been revealed, and I had survived it. The cancer would continue its march, but I was still here, still capable of love, still capable of forgiveness. And in that, I found a fragile yet enduring form of victory. The weeks turned into months. Chemotherapy sessions blurred into a rhythm I could barely tolerate. My body grew weaker. My hair fell out in clumps, and my reflection became a stranger I scarcely recognized. Yet, through all this, I found a strange serenity settling over me, a quiet strength that I didn't know existed before the cancer and betrayal had invaded my life. Karen's attempts to reconnect became more frequent. She lingered in rooms where she had no right to linger, her voice trembling with apologies I couldn't bring myself to hear. I had long since stopped seeking explanations. The reasons didn't matter. What mattered was that I had chosen the path of forgiveness. Not for her sake, not for appearances, but for my own. Forgiveness had become my shield, my armor against a world that had dealt me unimaginable pain. The girls noticed changes in me before I even did. Claire said one evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, "Dad, you seem different. Calmer. Somehow. You're not angry anymore." I smiled, a small, genuine smile that touched something deep in my soul. I've realized that holding on to anger only hurts me, not anyone else. I said, "Life has a way of giving us too much and taking too much all at once. I'm learning to focus on what I can control." Emma, younger but equally perceptive, reached out and took my hand. "We just want you to be okay, Dad. That's all we care about." Her words hit me harder than any chemotherapy session ever could. In that moment, I understood that my daughters were my legacy, my reason to endure. Karen's betrayal, the deceit, the lies, they were shadows that I would acknowledge, but they would not define the rest of my life. My energy, however limited, would go toward love, not resentment. I began keeping a private journal again, chronicling my thoughts and reflections. Unlike before, it was no longer fueled by suspicion and anger, but by gratitude and clarity. I wrote about the laughter of my daughters, the quiet mornings where the sunlight spilled into the kitchen, the moments of tenderness between Karen and me when we shared fleeting conversations. Even though the betrayal had broken something fundamental between us, fragments of our life together remained worth acknowledging, worth preserving in memory. There were difficult moments, of course, nights when the pain became unbearable, when the disease gnawed at my body and every breath felt like a betrayal of its own. During those nights, I would lie awake, thinking of the hotel receipt, the hidden texts, the whispered phone calls. And yet, even in that darkness, I felt a strange liberation. The anger, which had once threatened to consume me, was gone. I had released it into the void, choosing instead to focus on the moments that mattered. I never told anyone, Karen, the girl of my friends, about the depth of betrayal I had uncovered. I didn't need to. Revealing it would only reopen wounds and distract from the time I had left. There was power, I realized, in keeping my dignity intact, in silently acknowledging the truth while living above it. I had faced cancer without complaint, and I faced betrayal without surrender. That, I decided, was enough. The girls were my anchor. I spent hours with them, teaching them how to grill meat perfectly, showing Claire how to fix a leaky faucet, helping Emma plan her wedding even though my body ached at the thought of not being there. We laughed, we cried, we argued, and through it all, I realized that love, uncomplicated, raw, and unselfish, was still possible. Karen, for her part, eventually stopped trying to explain herself. She seemed to understand, in her own way, that some wounds were beyond words. Our interactions became polite, civil, occasionally tender. I forgave her fully in my heart, not because I condone her actions, but because I could no longer afford to let bitterness steal the remaining beauty of my life. Forgiveness was a gift I gave to myself, a way to reclaim agency over my emotions and my mortality. In the final months, when the disease tightened its grip, I found myself thinking often of the life I had lived. Not the betrayal, not the pain, not the fear, but the love, the resilience, the small victories of endurance. I didn't have much time left, that much was certain, but I faced each day with a sense of calm I had never known before. And then one evening, sitting on the porch with Claire and Emma, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt it, a profound peace, a quiet acceptance of life and all its imperfections. I looked at Karen, seated nearby, her eyes reflecting the fading light. I saw her not as a betrayer, but as a flawed human being, someone capable of mistakes, as we all are. And in that moment, I forgave her completely. Not because she deserved it, but because I needed to. I knew I would never fully recover from cancer. I would not see decades ahead, would not grow old in the way I had imagined. But I also knew that I had reclaimed something far more precious than life itself: dignity, peace, and love untainted by resentment. I had faced death, betrayal, and loss, and emerged with my soul intact. In the quiet of that evening, surrounded by the laughter of my daughters and the muted presence of my wife, I realized a truth that had eluded me for so long. Life is fleeting, fragile, and unpredictable, but the way we respond to it, how we choose to endure, to forgive, and to love, is what defines us. I don't know how long I have left. Perhaps months, perhaps weeks. But I do know this: I have forgiven, I have loved, and I have lived a way that honors the life I've been given. And that, in the end, is everything.